Right now, if the ocean outside your window suddenly pulled back and vanished, exposing the seafloor, what would you do? Most people would walk closer. They would take out their phone, they would film it. But for tens of thousands of years, that single moment, the sea pulling back, was the difference between a family that lived and a family that was gone by nightfall. There was no siren, no app, no emergency broadcast. And somehow, entire coastal communities survive tsunamis that modern cities, with all their technology, still struggle to escape in time. The real answer to how they did it is far stranger than luck. It was memory. It was myth. It was a kind of knowledge passed down so carefully that it outlived the people who first learned it, sometimes by thousands of years. Start with the body. Before ancient humans understood anything about plate tectonics, their bodies already understood something was wrong. Researchers studying survivor accounts from coastal disasters have found a strange, repeating detail. People describe a silence. Birds stop calling. Insects go quiet. The wind seems to hold its breath. You have felt a small version of this yourself, maybe in a forest right before a storm. That sense that the world has paused. Ancient humans living directly off the land noticed this pause far more sharply than you or I ever could, because their survival depended on reading the environment every single day. A quiet forest was not just eerie to them, it was information. Then came the second clue. And this one was even harder to ignore. The ocean would retreat, not gently like a normal low tide, but suddenly, dramatically, pulling back hundreds of meters and exposing sand, rocks, and fish flopping in the open air. To someone unfamiliar with tsunamis, this looks like a gift. Free fish, an invitation to walk out and collect them. And that is exactly the trap that has killed people in the modern era, tourists and locals alike, who walked toward the exposed seabed instead of away from it. But in cultures with a long, unbroken memory of tsunamis, this retreating water triggered something closer to instinct than curiosity. The elders had told the story enough times that it became automatic. When the sea disappears, you do not walk forward, you run. This is where the story becomes less about individual instinct and more about something anthropologists call cultural transmission, meaning the passing of survival knowledge from one generation to the next, wrapped inside stories, songs, and rituals so it would not be forgotten. On Simeulue Island, off the coast of Sumatra, there is a word, smong, that means tsunami in the local dialect. It appears in lullabies sung to children. It appears in warnings shouted between neighbors. When the massive 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami struck, killing over 200,000 people across multiple countries, the death toll on Simeulue Island was remarkably small compared to nearby regions with no such tradition. Researchers studying the disaster, including work published by geologist Carrie Sia and colleagues, pointed directly to this oral history as the reason. A word in a lullaby, repeated for generations, saved lives in a way that no government warning system managed to. Why does this work? Why would a song succeed where modern infrastructure sometimes fails? Because stories do something warning systems cannot always do. They travel through emotion, not just information. A government alert tells you a fact. A story your grandmother sang to you as a child becomes part of who you are. Psychologists studying memory formation have found that information wrapped in narrative and repeated emotional context is retained far longer and recalled far faster under stress than plain data. When your amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for fear and threat detection, is flooded during a crisis, you do not reach for facts you read once in a pamphlet. You reach for the deepest, most rehearsed patterns in your memory. For a child raised on smong, that pattern was already there, waiting. This same pattern shows up on the other side of the world. Along the coast of Japan, stone markers called tsunami stones have stood for centuries, some dating back over 600 years. These are not decorative monuments. They are instructions carved directly into rock, placed at the exact boundary the ancient builders determined was safe from past tsunamis. One stone in the town of Aniyoshi carries an inscription that translates roughly to a warning never to build homes below this point. For hundreds of years, that instruction was followed. When the devastating tsunami of 2011 struck, homes built below the ancient stone markers were destroyed. Homes built above them, following a boundary set by people who had died centuries earlier, survived largely untouched. Think about that for a moment. A warning system with no batteries, no software, no updates, still functioning perfectly after 6 centuries. There is something almost humbling in that. Modern warning systems rely on sensors, satellites, and electricity. all of which can fail exactly when you need them most. A carved stone cannot fail. It cannot lose signal. It simply waits, silently, for as long as it takes. But survival was not only about memory of the past. It also depended on reading the present moment through the natural world. Long before seismographs existed, communities near fault lines learned to watch animals. Reports collected after multiple tsunami events describe elephants moving to higher ground minutes before the water arrived, flamingos abandoning low-lying breeding areas, and dogs refusing to leave the safety of hillsides despite their owners calling them. Scientists are still studying exactly why animals seem to sense these events earlier than humans. One leading theory involves their sensitivity to subtle vibrations in the earth, vibrations produced by the underwater earthquake that triggers the tsunami long before the wave itself becomes visible. Coastal communities who lived closely alongside animals, depending on them for food, transport, and companionship, learned to treat unusual animal behavior not as a curiosity, but as a warning worth acting on immediately. This raises an uncomfortable question about your own life today. You are, in almost every meaningful way, more informationally connected than any human who has ever lived. You carry a device that can access nearly the entire sum of human knowledge in seconds. And yet, in an actual moment of crisis, how much of that knowledge would you be able to access, trust, and act on fast enough? Ancient coastal communities could not look anything up. They had already done the looking up, decades or centuries earlier, and stored the answer inside a song, a stone, or a habit so deeply ingrained it no longer required conscious thought. There is a term for this kind of deep, embedded cultural knowledge, sometimes called generational memory. Anthropologist Patrick Nunn has studied oral traditions across the Pacific that describe geological events, coastlines that used to look different, islands that used to be connected to the mainland, events that, according to geological evidence, actually happened thousands of years earlier than written history in those regions begins. Nunn's research suggests some of these oral traditions may preserve real environmental memory passed down for over 7,000 years, reshaped slightly with each retelling, but never losing the essential warning at their core. 7,000 years is longer than most written languages have existed, and yet the memory survived, not carved in a library, but spoken, generation after generation, parent to child. This changes how you might think about what a story actually is. You probably think of stories as entertainment, something separate from practical survival. But for most of human history, stories were survival. They were the original data storage system, resilient to fire, flood, and the collapse of empires, because they lived inside people instead of objects. A library can burn, a hard drive can fail. A story told enough times to enough children becomes almost impossible to erase completely. And this brings us back to that image from the very beginning, the ocean pulling back, exposing the sea floor, an invitation that looks like a gift, but is actually a warning. Ancient humans, without any scientific instruments, still managed to correctly read this signal, generation after generation, because they had built systems, cultural, oral, and physical, specifically designed to outlast individual memory and individual lifetimes. They understood something that is easy to forget in a world of instant information. Knowledge that is not repeated, ritualized, and passed on with care is knowledge that disappears the moment its original owner does. So here is the real question, the one worth sitting with. If the ocean outside your window pulled back tonight, exposing the seafloor in total silence, would you know, immediately, in your body, before you had time to think, that this is not a gift? It is a warning, older than memory, waiting once again to be understood in time.